The International Society of Stem Cell Research has lifted their long-standing ban on researching embryos outside of the human body after the 14-day mark. Now, they've held this rule since the late 1970s, when human embryo research first became possible due to in vitro fertilization providing scientists with embryos that they previously did not have access to. However, until recently, scientists could not get them to survive in a lab environment for anywhere near 14 days. So it was a moot point. However, as scientists have gotten better at keeping embryos alive in a laboratory environment, the question of whether they should continue to not research embryos past the 14-day point has come back. And the International Society of Stem Cell Researchers has put a lot of thought into this. They had more than 100 Zoom meetings before they decided to lift this rule. However, they haven't done this without objection. Bioethicist Josephine Johnson says, "I think it's a mistake to drop the 14-day rule and not propose another rule. Dropping the limit has the potential to really shake public trust." Now, why would the public care about this? I think that it's a good time now to back up and just talk a little bit about how human embryos develop so that we can understand the potential danger of having these embryos exist for longer than 14 days. So on day 0, the sperm meets the egg. You can see fertilization here in this first picture. Here is day 4, something called the blastocyst. You can see it's a big ring of cells that is differentiated with the second group of cells here on the inside. However, there is still no organ formation. You can see around somewhere between day 4 and day 8, the blastocyst will implant itself into the uterine wall. Studies so far have examined the embryo as it makes its first divisions. In the second week of development, the inner two masses of cells form 2 layers. One becomes the embryo itself, and the other the supporting tissue. You can see here a yolk sac forms and an amniotic cavity forms within the cell. This is kind of the beginning of the differentiation that we see. We can then see day 14. Here is the This is where researchers have not been allowed to study past until recently, and this is a phase called gastrulation. After day 14, the embryo begins gastrulation through the primitive streak. It starts to develop a body axis and will form 3 layers of tissue that become different organs. So this is why it is really relevant to researchers. It is believed that 1/3 of all miscarriages as well as congenital birth defects occur between days 14 and 22. So for them to be able to perform studies on how the embryo develops during this stage would certainly give them insights that would allow them to walk down the first steps of the path towards preventing some of those birth defects. However, this does not come without ethical conundrums that have been raised before, such as if scientists continue down this path of getting better and better at keeping embryos alive, they might go to the point where they have an embryo with a beating heart, with neurons that are firing, and they will then have to deal with the very real ethical question of, what do we do now that we have this embryo with a working brain to some degree and a beating heart? This is something that we need to have national governments address before we get there, or that we need to have international groups of scientists like the International Society for Stem Cell Research address. What they're effectively doing is leaving it to national governments and leaving it to the boards of universities in countries that allow for this research. In case you're wondering, countries like Germany don't allow for human embryo research at all. The United States allows it, but does not allow it to be federally funded. So this is a topic that's right there on the edge. And how scientists typically skirt this topic being on the edge is using models. Basically, what they will do is construct a model of the stage that they would like to study. For example, previous to this rule being lifted, if they wanted to study the gastrulation stage, they could put together a model that is functionally similar to that. And this is all well and good if it is contained within the parameters of the thing that they are trying to study. However, this can get dangerous quick if they give this model the parts of the cell that it needs, or the cells that it needs, to perpetuate itself, to continue to live, to continue to grow. in the classifications put forward by the International Society for Stem Cell Research, these models, which are equipped in the same way that an embryo would be equipped to survive, and embryos are kind of grouped together, despite the fact that there were no limits from the International Society for Stem Cell Research on using these models. So, as a society, we need to be informed because science is advancing rapidly. We need to understand how we feel about the ethical implications of scientists creating what could easily become fully formed cognizant human beings in a laboratory setting. And they're not going to do this in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But if you're a young person like me, they very well may be able to do this within our lifetime. Just think about our grandparents and the things that the scientists had not invented when they were born that they are now getting to take advantage of in their old age. Science can certainly move very far. And we know that scientists are not always the best at policing themselves. We've seen this through the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're somebody who spends your whole life researching a topic, you are heavily incentivized to not pull out of that research, even if it is to the detriment of society. We saw this with gain-of-function research in the Wuhan laboratory. You can't blame these scientists who are on the cutting edge of research in their field for not wanting to pull back. However, there needs to be people that come in from the outside, like the Obama administration did, and say, gain-of-function research is too dangerous, you're not allowed to do it. We need a similar ethical body to come in and say, here is the point which scientists can agree that we should not go past in this human embryo study, because we will cross that ethical line and start creating human beings in a laboratory setting. And this is something that we need to discuss and think about as a society. If you are interested in science news, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. My name is Dylan Nolan. Thank you for watching.